Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this special media briefing on the Seattle Metro Chamber's 8th installment of the Index Polling Research. My name is Jillian Hens. I am the Director of Communications at the Chamber, and I'll be moderating today's briefing. Our presenters today will do a run-through of the data. Sit tight and take notes. We will allow our presenters to get through all of the data first and then answer your questions at the end. If you would like to follow along with the data, an unabridged slide deck and the complete crosstabs are located on the Chamber's website. Simply scroll to Index 8. And I'm going to go ahead and pop that in the chat now so you can follow along. Go. After the presentation, each of you can ask one question and one follow-up. We'll allow for more questions if we have time. Additional questions after the briefing can be sent to my email address. I'll pop that in the chat now too. Now that we're all set up, I would like to introduce you to Seattle Metro Chamber President and CEO, Rachel Smith, and Andrew Thibault, partner at Fulcrum Strategic. Over to you, Rachel.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jillian, and thank you all for joining us today as we share results from the latest installment of the Index, the Chamber's public opinion research project that we launched in August of 2021. This is our 8th time collecting and analyzing index data. And before we dive into the numbers, 2 points I will make for setting the context. First is a reminder that what you're going to hear today is what voters are saying. This is a survey of voters, not businesses. Second is why a business organization does this work. We do it because quality of life underlies attracting and retaining employees to move here or to stay here. And employers and their employees live, work, recreate, have families, and vote here. It also impacts the decisions of business owners to stay, grow, or locate here. And before we get started, I also want to thank Andrew Thibault, Kevin White, and the teams at Fulcrum Strategic and EMC Research, where they are not just hired pollsters, they are truly our thought partners and an accountability function in generating solid quality of life data. So, jumping in. The punchline from this data set is that Seattle won't go backwards. Voters don't want the Trump administration to take us back, and they don't want to give an inch on the quality of life progress that we have made here in Seattle. While there are still significant challenges being faced by both residents and our businesses, Seattle voters believe that we have made progress and we need to keep moving forward, as evidenced by the index having taken another jump up from 4.66 to 4.75, nearly breaking the halfway mark, which is more significant given that we hit an index low of 3.47 at this exact time 3 years ago. So what does it mean to not go backwards? It means voters want leaders to oppose the Trump administration when there is overreach or when their activities don't align with our Seattle values. For example, 67% of voters believe we should be protecting core progressive values like social justice, equity, and inclusivity. And 72% believe we should be aggressively standing up to the Trump administration, including joining lawsuits against the administration when the federal government overreaches. And Seattleites want leaders to continue to make progress on our top priorities here at home and not let what is happening federally take our eye off the ball locally. For example, homelessness as a top concern is flat. And more Seattleites believe the city has made progress on reducing encampments than they did just 6 months ago. And public safety has dropped as a top priority, in my opinion, quite significantly. People are feeling significantly safer visiting downtown at night, and nearly half believe that we've made progress on public safety. And I will say these matter a lot, especially addressing public safety and homelessness in keeping our local economy healthy in the face of destructive economic policy coming out of the other Washington. That is particularly important because 84% of voters have become more concerned about their own personal financial situation since President Trump took office. 81% want to see leaders focus on protecting local jobs and small businesses in this uncertain environment by lowering the cost to start and run a business in Seattle. And 76% believe city leaders should be incentivizing businesses to create family wage jobs here in Seattle so that our local economy stays resilient in the face of national economic uncertainty. And that is also no doubt because Seattleites understand that businesses are already leaving. 73% of voters agree that businesses in Seattle are closing down or leaving for nearby cities because the cost of doing business has gotten so high here. So voters are paying attention. They want us to stand up for our values, to fight the national policies that negatively impact our city, but also not to succumb to the endless DC news cycle. And the clearest evidence of that, if there's one thing that you take away from this briefing, that I think most embodies this notion, when asked to choose, 59% or 6 in 10 voters agree with the statement that we can't go back, that the city is finally making progress on things like reducing encampments, open air drug markets, and public safety. And while we absolutely must fight Trump, we can't let that chaos distract us from this progress. Versus 36% of voters who want leaders to fight back against Trump and defend our values, even if it means taking our attention away from homelessness, open air drug markets, and public safety. And the last thing I'll say, and this is a little bit more of just my take as we go into an election year in Seattle, my reminder to candidates will be this, messages just about fighting Trump or policy positions to roll things back like public safety gains or, pushing some of the old slogans like stop the sweeps on homelessness, those are not likely to meet voters where they are. So there you have it. Seattle is moving forward. You can see it in the overall index number going up, in optimism going up, in visiting downtown Seattle numbers going up. And we won't let anyone or anything take us backwards, not the chaos at the federal level, or for that matter, any former failed local policies. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to review the full data set, and let's have Andrew present first, and then we'll hold questions till the end. Andrew, take it away.
Okay, is the screen visible? The title screen? It is.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rachel. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 8th edition of the Index. Methodology, I'll do a quick reminder here. This is the same methodology we've used for the previous 7 versions. It's mixed mode. What that means is, in addition to live telephone, we also do email and text to web to make sure that we get a representative sample of registered voters in Seattle. Something to remember as we go through this, close to 2/3 of Seattle voters identify as Democrats. So all of these numbers that you're seeing are primarily being driven by attitudes among Democrats. The registered voter universe compared to a likely voter universe is younger, more progressive, more likely to be renters, more likely to be new to the city, and more likely to be people of color. So it's more representative of the general population than a likely voter survey would be. We did this in mid-April. We conducted 700 total interviews. I'm going to skip the summary. You can come back to that on your own time. I'm going to talk through these key points that are in the summary as we go through the deck. Rachel mentioned this, the index, which is our aggregate measure, the questions of overall sentiment is up again. It's gone up 2 consecutive indices. And over here on the right, these are the questions that form the index. These are all about attitudes about the city and quality of life, safety, downtown. This is not a political measure in any way. There are no ratings of local government or anything like that. So you can see we've come a long way from the 3.79 to the 4.75. There's going to be a consistent theme here, which is voters are paying attention. They are noticing the progress that the city is making, but there's still lots more to do. As a reminder, the last time we did the index, we saw a lot of movement around homelessness and encampments and voters starting to recognize the gains made there, the progress made there. In this survey, what you're going to hear again and again is voters are recognizing the progress made on public safety in a very real way. And so, that's why I say voters are paying close attention, because the city is rolling out policies. Voters are reacting to those policies and the outcomes based on those policies. Getting into the national environment, we have not asked about this before. It seemed prudent this time with all that's going on in the other Washington to understand how Seattle voters are feeling about that. And No surprise, they're not feeling good about it. 9 out of 10 Seattle voters think things in the United States have gotten pretty seriously off on the wrong track. That's the highest wrong track number I've seen. Um, I am worried about that national economic policies will lead to a recession. Voters are deeply concerned about a potential recession. 9 out of 10 voters. 3 out of 4 are strongly concerned. And then it's tying right down to their personal financial situation. I've become more concerned about my personal financial situation since Trump took office. 84% agree, 65% strongly agree. So there's a lot of concern and worry about what's going on at the national level, and obviously how that's impacting things here in Seattle. Getting into our more standard questions that we've asked in all the previous versions of the index around quality of life. Right direction, wrong track is at 49% right direction, 48% wrong track. It's net positive, barely. It's within the margin of error. But when we look at the next slide, which is the trend in optimism, you'll see why this is such good news, because we got as high in Seattle as 76% wrong track. And we have now pulled even, which is great news. Attitudes about overall quality of life. Those saying it's getting worse, it's down 3 points. Same or better, up 3 points. Obviously, still a long way to go, but a similar split here to the overall optimism. Throughout this whole process, where voters were concerned about policies on the ground in Seattle and what was happening downtown and all of that, they remained optimistic about the future of this region. And in this index, we're actually seeing an increase in optimism, which is really interesting given how folks are feeling about the things at the national level and how much impact that has on our lives. Voters have become more optimistic about this future of this region. So up 5 points. This is a new question. I'm optimistic about the future of downtown Seattle. This is majority positive. 53% agree. There's not a lot of intensity here, but to see this net positive, especially with what we've seen over the previous 7 versions of the index, which is people were not coming downtown as much because they were worried about safety and encampments. And so there was a lot of perception that things were worse than they actually were. And what we're starting to see with the gains on public safety is people are coming downtown more often. And so that's starting to be reflected in their optimism about downtown. So this is the right direction, wrong track for the city. And you can see in spring of 2022, we were at 76% saying things were pretty seriously off on the wrong track. So to get to 50-50, to finally get right direction above wrong track is remarkable progress. And one of the things I remind people about is it took us a long time to get to that 76% and the 60% pessimistic about the direction of the city. And voters have been worried about these problems of encampments and public safety and affordability for a really long time, and have been desperate to see progress on these issues. And again, as we saw in the last index, they were starting to see the progress on encampments, and this one, they're starting to see the progress on public safety. Again, the optimism of Seattleites in terms of the region and the city. I'm proud to call myself a Seattleite. That's up to 80%. It's up 4 points. So the brand of Seattle is still strong. Voters, there is a pent-up demand to be optimistic again, and voters are just waiting to see the proof on the ground. They're waiting to see sustained, visible progress on issues they care about. And they're starting to see that. What do people love the most about Seattle? And this is an open end, so we don't give them answers. They just say whatever they say, and we aggregate it into categories. It's the outdoors. It's the beauty of the area. It's the top reason that people love being in Seattle. What are the other side of that coin? What are the issues facing Seattle that you are most frustrated or concerned about? This is the first data point that tells me that voters are seeing the improvements in public safety and reacting to it. So if you look at homelessness, it is still the top concern, but it's flat, up 2 points. Cost of living and affordability up a point, essentially flat. Crime, drugs, public safety down 9 points in terms of the level of concern voters have, which I think is really interesting. And this is a consistent number on all our questions that are related to public safety, you're seeing this 9 to 10 point improvement across the board. This is the trend. So, remembering where we started on homelessness, 65% saying that was an issue that they were most frustrated or concerned about. Then we saw in the last version of the index, it took a huge drop as the city's efforts and policies around that, voters started to see that. And you saw this double-digit drop in concern about homelessness that essentially stayed flat. And what you're seeing now in this version of the index is a double-digit drop in concern about public safety. It went from 41 to 31. The long-term trend is really down for homelessness and public safety. The third most salient issue or issue that voters are most frustrated about is the only one that doesn't have a long-term downward trend. Concern about affordability and housing costs started at 15%. It's now at 29%. It's been flat over the last few versions of the index, but it hasn't yet seen that downward trend. This is a question we've asked since the beginning. Have you actively considered moving out of Seattle? And are you still actively considering moving out of Seattle? It's 52% that have considered and 40% who are still actively considering. These are both low water marks for these questions. We didn't start asking, are you still actively considering until the fall of 2022. In the past, we've asked why, and the top issues in the past were homelessness and public safety. So I think the voters seeing the progress on those issues is driving this number down. What's keeping it from going down further, I'm almost certain, is affordability, right? The cost of housing, the cost of living here. Because, as we saw, 80% are proud to call themselves Seattleites. They're optimistic about the future of the region, but things are expensive. This is a new set of questions. In the past, we had asked a series of questions. Which of these things do you think would have the most impact on improving quality of life? This is a little bit different. The intro is there are a number of things city leaders can focus on to improve quality of life here in Seattle. How important is it to you for city leaders to focus on these issues? Voters' top 3 priorities, again, in the age of Trump and national chaos, are focus on the basics, protect local jobs, maintain progress on public safety. This was a 1 to 7 scale, so 1 was not at all important. 7 was extremely important. This is everything above the midpoint. You can see all of these 6 and 10 or more say, yeah, these things are important for city leaders to focus on, but you can't focus on everything. And if you look at the things that are at the top, taking care of the basics, protecting local jobs and small businesses in this uncertain economic environment by lowering the cost to start and run a business in Seattle, maintaining progress on public safety and reducing street disorder by continuing to shut down open air drug markets. Look at the intensity here. Half of Seattle voters rated this as high as they possibly can. So a lot of intensity here. Another business related or economic policy here, incentivizing businesses to create family wage jobs here in Seattle so that our local economy stays resilient in the face of national economic uncertainty. So what the voters are saying, and kind of a preview of that question, that forced choice that Rachel said was a great takeaway. One of the ways voters are telling us they want city leaders to resist Trump is by protecting Seattle's economy, protecting Seattle's progress on public safety, and keeping our eye on the ball on the basics, making Seattle successful. On down the list, continuing to reduce encampments. This is another one that generated a lot of intensity and not surprising in the city of Seattle, aggressively standing up to the Trump administration, including joining lawsuits against the administration when the federal government overreaches. And then that 52% intensity there. So the same as on public safety, but it kind of a broader cut at that same idea, protecting core progressive values like social justice, equity, and inclusivity. Important to 2/3, but the intensity is lower. And compared to other priorities, this is down the list. And then updating Seattle zoning laws and expediting permitting. 6 and 10 say that's important. We have more questions around housing that I think paint a pretty clear and consistent picture of what voters want in terms of housing growth and density. This is that now famous forced choice question. And we looked at what folks were saying out there, and we wanted to really set up this choice between, are we all in on resisting the Trump administration because it's an existential threat? We need to do everything we can at every level. So we need to fight back by defending our commitments to social justice, equity, and economic fairness. We need to focus on progressive policies, even if that means taking our attention away from some local issues, versus we can't go back. After years of inaction, we're finally making progress. We have to fight policies that impact our city, but we can't let the endless stream of chaos at the national level distract us from building on our hard-won progress. So you see 59 to 36, a 23-point gap towards stay focused on local issues, resist or fight the Trump administration when there are direct impacts, but don't make that the be all end all of what you're doing. Every single subgroup except socialists, self-identified socialists, give this a majority, focusing on local issues. This is a great news for the city, evidence that voters are paying attention, evidence that the city policies are having an impact. I would feel safe visiting downtown Seattle during the day and at night. Both jumped 10 points during the day from 75 to 85 and at night from 35 to 45. It's a pretty significant jump, high water marks. And if you think about this, people's perceptions of downtown are more accurate if they're visiting downtown. And if people visit downtown and see the positive things happening on the ground, that creates this reinforcing cycle of increasing optimism and not even to mention, or I will mention also, the economic benefits, right? Voters are very concerned about the national economy and how it will impact the local economy and their own personal finances. And getting people downtown is one of the ways a huge way we strengthen our local economy. This is a new question. In the past, we had asked people if they were coming downtown more or less often than they were prior to the pandemic. We've gotten enough distance here that we're now asking coming downtown more or less often than last year. The good news is 68% said they're visiting at least the same, or a quarter more often. There's still a third here that are visiting less often, and part of that is certainly people not coming downtown for work anymore. But there's still work to do. But this is intimately related to how safe people feel going downtown. And so as this continues to improve, more people will be coming back downtown. These numbers will grow. Progress on key issues. So last time, because of the city's, in the last version of the index, because of the city's focus on encampments and homelessness policy, we had asked this question. The city has made meaningful progress in reducing the number of homeless encampments. That was at 39% in the index last time. It's picked up 6 more points. It's now at 45%. We also asked this about public safety, so meaningful progress on public safety. 48% agree that the city is making progress. Seattle has made meaningful progress on shutting down open air drug markets. This is at 40%. If you remember, when we asked about things that would improve quality of life that city leaders could do, shutting down open air drug markets was very high on the list. It was third on the list. So, obviously all of these would be great if we keep moving in a positive direction and get over a majority. But given how long it took us to get in this position, and voters hearing that these problems were being addressed and then not seeing the progress that they want to see, voting for ballot measures to help address these problems. So there's going to be a lag between how quickly these improve, but to get to 50-50 on public safety, given where we started, I think is great news. And to see the one tracking question continue to improve, not only did the agree go up 6 points, the disagree went down 8 points. So the theme here being voters are seeing the progress, but there's much more to be done. Tracking question here, another question about how do you feel? It's about optimism about the progress being made on downtown Seattle's recovery. Optimism's up 5 points, still a long way to go here. The neutral, roughly half are kind of in the neutral. Pessimism down 6 points. Again, movement in a positive direction. Folks are still worried about the future of downtown Seattle. You can see progress and still be worried that progress, especially given the history, you can be worried that progress won't be sustained, that we will go backwards. And so voters aren't ready yet to say, I fully trust that we're on the right path and we're going to get there. They need to continue to see sustained, visible progress. This is a new question. Businesses are closing down or leaving Seattle for nearby cities because the cost of doing business has gotten too high here. 3/4 agree. This necessarily has to include a supermajority of Democrats because they are the bulk of the city's voting population, but really true across almost all subgroups, this concern. Taxes and city regulations. This is a return on investment question. So are taxes too high or too low for the level of services the city provides? Too high is down 3 points. About right is up 4 points. I think we all know that taxes have not gone down between Index 7 and Index 8 in Seattle. So this is really about voters recognizing and seeing the return on their investment of tax dollars on the issues that they care most about. And in this survey, public safety. So they're saying I'm getting it's a better investment than I thought last time. So we also wanted to ask about cost of living because it's so central to voters' lives right now. And so we wanted to understand how much they think city regulations and taxes contribute to Seattle's high cost of living. And it's essentially a split here, but you have half saying that city regulations and taxes are either a primary factor or a major factor in our high cost of living. Growth in housing. There was this conventional wisdom, or I've heard the conventional wisdom that Seattle is anti-growth or single-family homeowners are anti-growth. But this question has been consistently strong. All things considered, growth and development has been a positive for my area. It's now up to 61%. It was at 56% last time. It's always been a majority and trending upwards. That doesn't mean that, if there's a development project in your neighborhood, you're going to be super excited. But it means that in general, Seattle voters understand the benefits of growth. And these two new questions reinforce that point in a really strong way. The city needs to streamline permitting to make it easier and faster to build new housing to address Seattle's housing affordability crisis. This really is a growth question because it's talking about building more housing. So to say yes to this, it has to mean that I want more growth. This last question is also new. Building more housing will help slow down Seattle's increasing housing costs. 66% agree with that. It's a 2-to-1 margin. So Seattle voters are telling us pretty clearly they want more supply. More housing is a positive. And when we look at this question, growth and development has been a positive for my area. There's no difference between homeowners and renters, right? There is support across the city for more density, more housing, and it's closely tied to concern about cost of living and affordable housing. I'll stop there and stop sharing my screen here. The online versions, I'll go through this real quick. When you look at the deck online, there's lots of subgroup data that you can look at and trend data. So please do dive in. There's some fascinating results by various subgroups, and there's some fascinating trend data.
Great. Thanks so much, both Rachel and Andrew. Now is the time for Q&A. If you would like to ask Rachel or Andrew a question, please put your name and media outlet in the chat, and I'll call on you when it's your turn. Unmute yourself, ask your question, and get your answer. To allow time for the question queue to assemble, I'm going to kick off our Q&A session with a starter question for Andrew. Homelessness has surpassed public safety as the voters' top concern. Why do you think that is, and how do you think city officials should approach both issues going forward?
Yeah, so what I would say is with that question about what are the issues facing Seattle that you're most frustrated or concerned about is really the other side of the coin, which is voters are less concerned about public safety than they were. So that dropped below homelessness, and homelessness essentially stayed flat. What was really fascinating to me and what you love to see as a researcher is you see external events, policies on the ground, news coverage, talking about a specific issue, and then you see the results in the data. So last time we saw that with homelessness, there were a lot of efforts on homelessness, and we saw in the index 7 a 13-point drop in concern about homelessness. And then this time there, before this index, there was a lot of focus on public safety, and we saw a 9-point drop in public safety. So that is always music to my ears when I see something going on in the external environment and it's reflected in the data. It means Seattle voters are paying close attention to what's going on in this city, and that's great news.
Great. Thanks so much, Andrew. Doug Trump from The Urbanist.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question on homelessness. It looks like this poll probably went out right before the point in time count came out recently, and Seattle Times did, a feature story on it. And, they did talk about how the encampments sweeps had, increased, tripled or more in the last few years. But, that the number of unsheltered people was still up. So it didn't necessarily mean that, those people were going away or getting housed. And, shelter space also being down there. So, uh, how do we kind of, marry those two things, and if we're just kind of moving people around and making them harder to see, or whether there's, fundamentally this issue is getting addressed.
Yeah, I'll take that. And then Andrew, if there's anything you want to add, I think Doug, from the data that we have, I don't think we can tease that apart, honestly. I think, we simply have, do you think that there has been progress on, reducing the number of encampments? So I don't think we can lean on the index necessarily for anything around those sort of opinions about specifically what should be done. I will say from the chamber's perspective, our position has always been one of an all of the above approach to homelessness, which means more shelter, which means more housing, which means more access to, treatment and services. And, that is the one that we continue to push. And I think, we've asked these questions in some different ways over time in the index. But when it comes to public safety and homelessness, I do think that is that all of the above approach is one shared by a lot of voters, and the one that we continue to advocate for. Andrew, I don't know if there's anything specific from the data you can add.
Yeah, I mean, what this measures is voter perception and behavior, right? It's not, it doesn't, test the accuracy of beliefs or anything like that. But, the good thing about perception shifting in a more positive direction on both encampments and public safety is it creates momentum to continue that work and build on it, because people finally are saying, this doesn't seem like we're just throwing money at the problem. You saw that in our taxes too high for the level of services you're getting. They're starting to see a return on investment. And when you see a return, that means you want to continue that policy, right? You want to continue to make progress.
Thank you. Okay, Doug, did you want to ask a follow-up question?
Sure. Yeah. And I'm curious about the other sort of related aspect of whether, there's these local issues and then there's these national Trump issues, and whether we should be focusing on local over that. It seems like there's a lot of bleed over, part of the reason why there were fewer shelters, had related to some federal policy of grants going away. It seems like it's going to be hard to keep that dichotomy. So I'm curious your thoughts about how how to sort of focus on local when there are so many federal impacts and whether that is a whether we're going to eventually just have to face that head on.
Yeah, and I would say we don't see it as a dichotomy at all. We see them as absolutely interrelated. And I think, that forced choice question, when we do a forced choice, it is called a forced choice for a reason. It is
Yeah.
because you are sort of pushing people, and Andrew can say more about that in a minute, but we don't see it as a dichotomy. We see them as inextricably linked. And so what we see from this data, what I interpret from this data, is that voters understand that there is a lot of chaos happening at the federal level, and that we need to do everything that we can here locally to sort of insulate from that. And there's a lot of, particularly around economic activity, right? They understand what's happening with tariffs. They understand what's happening, with cuts. They understand what's happening with these sort of policies that are likely to have a local impact. And they want to see us, making sure that our economy is resilient, that we continue to have good jobs, and that we blunt as much as possible the impacts on their own personal financial situation from what's happening at the federal level. So I would say not at all is this an either or. They are absolutely connected. And again, though, we are seeing clearly that voters don't want to go backwards here locally because of an exclusive focus on what is happening at the federal level. That's maybe how I would characterize it. And Andrew?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it is designed to, if you had to choose, right? And obviously people want both. The question is, how do you define resisting Trump, right? And what voters are saying to us is, by protecting our local economy and quality of life, that's what we do. We don't go chasing every single issue or make it the fundamental centerpiece. We stay strong, and that's how we resist best.
Great. Thanks for the questions, Doug. Seeing no other questions in the chat, Rachel, please provide a parting thought, and then I'll close us out.
Great. I am happy to do that. So I'll just actually reiterate what we already said, and what was kind of the response to Doug's good question, which is, we can and we should be opposing the Trump administration when there is overreach or when their activities don't align with our Seattle values. And at the same time, we need leaders to continue to make progress on our top priorities here at home. And again, not let that sort of mayhem of what is happening federally and the DC news cycle really distract us from making progress on the quality of life issues here. So I think that's the clear takeaway from me in this data, and hope that's helpful.
Thank you again to each of you for joining us today. I look forward to your follow-up questions in my email inbox, and I'll drop my email in the chat one more time. And when you are ready, you are welcome to disconnect and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.